The city is already silent when the radio begins transmitting. Not the silence of peace, but the heavy, unnatural quiet that comes after days of artillery. The streets are empty. Windows shattered. Telephone wires hanging like broken spiderwebs between blackened poles. Somewhere in the distance, a building collapses with a slow grinding sound. And inside a half-destroyed apartment building, on the second floor, a single radio operator is still sending messages. His name is Sergeant Lukas Adler. And according to orders, he should have left the city hours ago. In the final years of the war, cities across Eastern Europe changed hands quickly. Front lines shifted by the day, sometimes by the hour. Armies advanced through ruined streets while the previous defenders were still retreating through the opposite side of town. Communication in this chaos became one of the most valuable tools in war. A single radio operator could guide artillery, warn about approaching armor, or coordinate the last moments of a retreat. Without radios, entire divisions could disappear in confusion. That is why soldiers like Lukas Adler were often asked to stay behind longer than anyone else. Sometimes much longer. Lukas Adler was 27 years old. Before the war, he worked in a small repair shop fixing household radios. He was patient, precise. The kind of man who could sit quietly for hours adjusting tiny wires until static turned into a clear signal. The army discovered that skill quickly. Instead of a rifle, Lukas carried transmitters. Instead of trenches, he spent most of the war inside basements, bunkers, and abandoned buildings. He rarely saw the front lines, but he heard them constantly. Through the radio. For 3 days the city had been under constant bombardment. Artillery from the east. Closer every hour. Buildings crumbled. Streets filled with smoke. Eventually the order came. All remaining units were to withdraw west immediately. Engineers destroyed bridges. Vehicles pulled out. Infantry units moved through the streets in long exhausted columns. The city was being abandoned. But someone still needed to coordinate the retreat. Someone had to stay behind long enough to relay information about the enemy's movement. And that responsibility fell to Lukas. His orders were clear. Remain in the city. Transmit updates every 15 minutes. Leave only when enemy forces enter the central district. Simple. Precise. Military orders always sounded simple on paper. Reality rarely was. Lukas set up his radio inside what had once been an apartment living room. The ceiling above had partially collapsed. Cold air moved freely through the broken walls. A single oil lamp flickered beside the transmitter. Outside, the last trucks of the retreating army rumbled away into the distance. The sound slowly faded. Eventually there was only wind. And the quiet clicking of the radio key. Command, this is Adler Station. His voice was calm. Professional. Enemy artillery active eastern sector. No infantry movement observed. Static answered him for several seconds. Then the reply came. Copy, Adler Station. Continue observation. The hours passed slowly. War had a strange rhythm. Long stretches of waiting, followed by sudden moments where everything changed. For Lukas, the waiting was the hardest part. Each new transmission confirmed something he already knew. The army was gone. And he was now alone in the city. Night arrived quickly. Clouds covered the sky. Without electricity, the city fell into near total darkness. The only light came from occasional fires still burning in distant buildings. Lukas wrapped his coat tighter and continued sending reports. Every 15 minutes. Always the same routine. Listen. Observe. Transmit. Wait. But sometime after midnight, something changed. It began with a sound. Very faint. Somewhere in the street below. Footsteps. Lukas froze. For a moment he assumed it was wind moving debris. But the sound came again. Measured. Careful. Human. He moved quietly toward the window and looked down. The street below was barely visible in the darkness. Snow drifted across the empty road. Then he saw movement. 3 figures. Walking slowly between the ruined buildings. Soviet soldiers. Scouting ahead of the main force. Lukas stepped back from the window immediately. His instructions were clear. Transmit any confirmed enemy presence. He returned to the radio. Pressed the key. Command, this is Adler Station. A short pause. Enemy patrol observed entering Eastern District. Static crackled. Then the reply came. Understood. Continue observation. Lukas exhaled slowly. His hands were steady. But something inside him had changed. Because now the war was no longer somewhere far away. It was inside the city. And getting closer. Minutes passed. The patrol moved through the street below, searching buildings one by one. Doors opened. Closed. Boots echoed against the frozen pavement. Lukas remained completely still. Even the small sound of moving equipment could carry through broken walls. The radio lamp flickered. He watched the door across the room. Waiting. Another transmission time arrived. He pressed the key again. Command, enemy patrol continuing west along Main Street. This time the reply came slower. Static stretched across several seconds. Then a voice answered. But the message was different. Shorter. More urgent. Adler Station, prepare to withdraw. Lukas frowned slightly. Withdraw? That wasn't the original plan. Then the voice continued. Enemy armor moving faster than expected. A pause. We may lose the western road soon. Lukas looked around the ruined room. The radio equipment. The maps. The wires running through broken plaster. If he left now, communication with the city would be lost. Command would be blind. But if he waited too long, the enemy would surround the area completely. He reached for the microphone again. Command, confirm withdrawal order. Static filled the speaker. For a moment he thought the connection had dropped. Then the voice returned. Calmer now. Almost quiet. Adler, listen carefully. Another pause. You must stay a little longer. Lukas stared at the radio. Stay longer. Of course. That was always the answer. Radio operators were often the last men to leave. Sometimes the very last. Outside, the patrol's footsteps had moved further down the street. But in the far distance, a new sound appeared. Low. Heavy. Metal grinding against frozen road. Lukas didn't need binoculars to recognize it. Tank engines. He slowly returned to the window. Far beyond the dark buildings, faint shapes moved along the road. More vehicles. More soldiers. The main force was arriving. The city would not remain empty for long. Behind him, the radio crackled again. Adler Station, report. Lukas took a deep breath. Pressed the key. Enemy armored units approaching city center. His voice remained steady. But this time he added something new. A question. Command, how much longer do you need? The reply came after several seconds. Quiet. Almost reluctant. 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. That was all. 10 minutes before the road behind him would close forever. Lukas looked once more at the dark street below. Enemy soldiers were already moving through nearby buildings. Searching. Closing in. He turned back to the radio. Adjusted the headset. And prepared to send the next report. Because for the next 10 minutes, he would be the only voice left inside the city. And somewhere in the darkness below, a door suddenly opens. Boots begin climbing the stairs. The first step creaks. Not loudly. Just enough. The sound travels through the building like a quiet warning. Wood shifting. Weight pressing down on old boards. Boots. Someone is climbing the stairs. Slowly. Carefully. Sergeant Lukas Adler does not move. Not yet. The radio headset is still pressed against his ears. Static whispers softly through the receiver. But now another sound mixes with it. The measured rhythm of soldiers moving upward through the building. One step. Pause. Another step. The patrol below has entered the house. Lukas checks his watch. 8 minutes remain. 8 minutes until the army behind him escapes across the last western road. 8 minutes he has been ordered to hold the radio line open. Nothing more. Just 8 minutes. But in war, 8 minutes can feel like a lifetime. The radio crackles again. Adler Station, report enemy movement. Lukas keeps his voice low. Controlled. Enemy patrol inside Eastern District buildings. He hesitates briefly. Then adds quietly. They are conducting searches. Static answers him. Then the calm voice of command returns. Understood. Another pause. Continue transmission. Below him, the patrol spreads through the lower floors. Doors open. Furniture shifts. Someone speaks quietly in Russian. The soldiers are methodical. Professional. They are not rushing. Because they believe the city is already abandoned. And most of it is. But Lukas Adler is still there. Alone in a broken apartment with a radio set and a fading oil lamp. He looks around the room carefully. The equipment is too heavy to carry. The transmitter alone weighs more than 20 kilograms. Even if he tried, he would never reach the western road before the enemy closed it. His task was never to escape quickly. His task was simply to stay longer than everyone else. The footsteps on the stairs pause. Then continue. Closer now. The patrol is moving upward floor by floor. Searching each apartment. Lukas slowly turns the volume of the radio lower. Every small sound matters now. The quiet clicking of radio switches. The scratch of pencil on paper. Even breathing. 5 minutes remain. Outside, the distant rumble of armored vehicles grows louder. The enemy column is entering the city. Engine noise echoes between empty buildings. Metal tracks grinding over frozen pavement. The war is no longer approaching. It has arrived. Lukas presses the radio key again. Command, enemy armor entering eastern sector. He watches the door while speaking. Every word measured. Every movement slow. Multiple vehicles confirmed. Static fills the receiver. Then the reply comes. Adler Station, excellent work. The voice sounds tired. Grateful. We are clearing the final units from the western road. Another pause. 4 more minutes. 4 minutes. Lukas nods quietly to himself. 4 minutes is manageable. 4 minutes is simply time. Time he can survive. Then a door slams somewhere below. Loud. Unexpected. A Russian voice shouts something sharply. Another soldier answers. Boots begin moving faster now. They have found something. Or someone. The patrol begins climbing more quickly. No longer cautious. No longer searching slowly. Now they are moving with purpose. Up the stairs. Toward the second floor. Toward Lukas. He glances around the room again. There are 2 doors. One leads back into the hallway. The other leads into a collapsed bedroom. Neither offers real cover. Running would only make noise. Noise would reveal his position instantly. So Lukas does the only thing that makes sense. He sits down at the radio again. 3 minutes remain. He presses the transmitter key once more. Command, enemy patrol moving inside building. His voice stays calm. They are approaching my position. The reply arrives almost immediately. Adler Station, hold transmission as long as possible. A pause. Then softer. You have done more than enough. Lukas smiles slightly at that. Soldiers rarely hear those words. Especially not during a retreat. The footsteps reach the second floor. Now the sound is unmistakable. Boots on broken tile. Equipment shifting. Rifles brushing against walls. A flashlight beam appears briefly under the hallway door. Lukas switches off the oil lamp. The room falls into darkness. Only the faint glow of radio tubes remains. 2 minutes. The patrol stops outside the apartment door. A voice speaks quietly. Another answers. Metal clicks. Perhaps a rifle being adjusted. Perhaps a door handle being tested. Lukas watches the radio dial glowing faintly in the dark. For years this machine has connected him to the outside world. Voices traveling through invisible waves. Across forests. Across mountains. Across battlefields. Now it may be the last thing anyone hears from the city. He presses the key again. His final transmission begins. Command, enemy forces inside the building. Static answers him. But no one interrupts. They are listening. Every second matters now. Enemy armor moving through central streets. Outside, tank engines grow louder. Heavy shadows move past broken windows. Metal against stone. The war has reached the heart of the city. Behind him, the apartment door handle begins to turn slowly. Lukas continues speaking. Even as the door begins to open. Enemy control of city center imminent. His voice remains steady. Professional. Exactly as every radio operator is trained to sound. The door opens wider. Flashlight beams cut through the darkroom. A soldier steps inside. Then another. Rifles raised. Searching. But Lukas does not turn around. He only speaks one final line into the radio. Quietly. Clearly. Adler Station, transmission ending. There is a pause on the line. Then the voice from command answers. Soft. Almost respectful. Message received. Lukas releases the transmitter key. The radio falls silent. Behind him, the soldiers shout. Flashlights flood the room with light. Boots rush forward. Rifles aimed. Voices demanding surrender. But Lukas Adler simply raises his hands slowly. The mission is finished. The western road is already empty. The army has escaped. Outside, Soviet tanks continue rolling through the ruined city. But far beyond the horizon, hundreds of German soldiers are still marching west. Alive. Because one radio operator stayed behind. Just a little longer. And somewhere deep inside the radio network, the last signal from Adler Station fades into static. The room is full of light now. Not warm light. Not the kind that belongs in homes. But the sharp, cold beams of military flashlights. Dust floats through the air like pale snow. Broken plaster covers the floor. Radio wires snake across the room toward the silent transmitter. And in the middle of it all, Sergeant Lukas Adler stands with his hands raised. Around him, Soviet soldiers move quickly, searching the room. One of them kicks the radio equipment. Another pulls the headset from the table. A third soldier keeps his rifle trained on Lukas. For a moment, no one speaks. The only sound is the distant rumble of tanks outside. The city is no longer empty. The patrol leader steps forward. He studies Lukas carefully. Then he gestures toward the radio. One word in Russian. A question. Lukas doesn't need to understand the language to know what they want. Who is he speaking to? How long had he been transmitting? Where were the retreating forces? Information. In war, information is always the most valuable prize. Lukas answers slowly. In broken Russian he learned years earlier. Radio operator. He nods toward the equipment. Orders to stay. That is all he says. Nothing more. The patrol leader watches him for several seconds. Then he gestures again. 2 soldiers begin disconnecting the radio cables. They are careful with the equipment. Not destroying it. Preserving it. Because every captured radio might reveal something useful. Frequencies. Codes. Signals. War often continues long after the shooting stops. Inside maps. Inside documents. Inside machines. Outside, the city is changing quickly. More Soviet units move into the district. Infantry spreads between buildings. Tanks position themselves along main roads. Search teams move door to door, confirming what the patrol already suspects. The city has been abandoned. Mostly. But not completely. In wars like this, someone is always left behind. A wounded soldier. A straggler. A radio operator. Inside the apartment, Lukas finally lowers his hands. The soldiers allow it. One of them checks his pockets. Another removes his pistol. No one strikes him. No one shouts. They have seen thousands of prisoners already. By this stage of the war, another captured soldier is simply routine. The patrol leader looks again at the silent radio. Then at Lukas. He asks something else in Russian. This time Lukas understands clearly. Why didn't you leave? It is a simple question. But the answer is complicated. Lukas looks at the radio transmitter. Then at the broken walls of the room. Finally he shrugs slightly. Orders. The patrol leader studies him again. For a moment, the 2 men simply look at each other. Both soldiers. Both tired. Both aware that this war has lasted far too long. Outside the city, the front continues moving west. Retreating German units march through snow-covered roads. Some travel by truck. Others on foot. Columns stretch for kilometers across frozen fields. They do not know exactly how close the enemy was to closing the road behind them. They only know they were told to keep moving. And so they do. Step after step. Hour after hour. Through forests. Through villages. Through endless winter roads. Back inside the ruined apartment building, the patrol prepares to move. The radio equipment has been disconnected. One soldier carries the transmitter. Another takes the documents from Lukas's table. Maps. Notes. Transmission logs. Every piece of information is carefully collected. War rewards patience. Even in victory. The patrol leader gestures toward the hallway. Time to leave. Lukas steps toward the door slowly. For the first time since the soldiers entered, he looks out the shattered window. The street below is now full of movement. Infantry marching. Vehicles arriving. Officers directing units through the ruined intersections. The city that had been silent just hours earlier now belongs to a different army. War moves like that. Quiet one moment. Overwhelming the next. Cities change hands. Flags change. But the ruins remain the same. The patrol begins leading Lukas down the stairs. The wooden steps creak again under the weight of boots. The same sound he heard earlier when they first entered the building. Only now he is part of their movement. No longer hidden. No longer transmitting. Just another soldier being escorted into the cold morning air. Outside, the wind has grown stronger. Snow drifts across the empty street. Lukas steps onto the frozen pavement and takes a long breath. For the first time in many hours, he is no longer responsible for the radio. No more transmissions. No more timing. No more waiting for enemy footsteps. The silence inside his mind feels strange. Almost unfamiliar. But the war around him continues. Columns of Soviet soldiers march past without even looking at him. To them, he is just one prisoner among thousands. The patrol leader signals for Lukas to walk. They begin moving west through the city, following the same roads the retreating army used only hours earlier. Then, somewhere behind them, a sudden explosion echoes through the streets. Not artillery. Something else. Sharp. Close. The soldiers turn their heads briefly. A building several blocks away collapses slowly into the street. Smoke rises between shattered walls. Perhaps a delayed demolition charge. Perhaps an ammunition cache left behind. In war, destruction often continues long after soldiers move on. Lukas watches the smoke drift upward. For a moment, he wonders if the army he helped guide to safety is already many kilometers away. Marching. Escaping. Surviving. Because of 10 extra minutes of radio transmissions. The patrol leader pushes him gently forward. They continue walking through the ruined city. Past burned vehicles. Past broken storefronts. Past abandoned homes. The war has moved through here like a storm. And storms rarely ask permission before they arrive. As they reach the next intersection, Lukas glances back one last time. The apartment building where he spent the night stands quietly behind them. Just another broken structure among hundreds. No one passing through the street would guess that for several hours. It held the last working radio in the city. Far away, the retreating columns continue disappearing into the white horizon. The road behind them is now closing. Soviet units advance through the same routes. The distance between the two armies grows smaller by the hour. But somewhere along that road, hundreds of soldiers are still alive. Still marching. Still moving west. Because one signal continued transmitting. Just a little longer than expected. And for Sergeant Lukas Adler, the war is far from over. The wind arrives before the morning. Cold. Sharp. Moving through the ruined streets like an invisible tide. Snow drifts across empty intersections. Tank tracks carve dark lines through the white surface. Smoke rises quietly from buildings that burned during the night. The war has passed through this city like a storm. And now another army occupies its silence. In the middle of a long column of soldiers moving west through the streets, Sergeant Lukas Adler walks under guard. No one rushes. There is no urgency now. The city is already secured. The front line continues moving somewhere beyond the horizon. But here, in the aftermath, time slows again. Around Lukas, other prisoners begin appearing from different streets. A wounded infantryman supported by 2 soldiers. A young mechanic pulled from a garage where he had hidden overnight. A cook discovered in the basement of a burned restaurant. War leaves people behind in strange places. Not every soldier retreats in perfect order. Not every plan unfolds the way commanders imagine. Sometimes the final moments of a battle are quiet, scattered, and uncertain. The patrol eventually reaches a temporary command post. An old municipal building near the central square. Half the roof has collapsed. But the stone walls remain standing. Inside, maps have already been spread across wooden tables. Officers move between rooms carrying reports. Telephone wires stretch through broken windows. War reorganizes itself quickly. Even inside ruins. Lukas is brought inside. His hands are no longer raised. There is no need. He is exhausted. Cold. But calm. One of the officers gestures toward a chair. Another studies the captured radio equipment placed carefully on the table. The same transmitter Lukas used throughout the night. The officer asks questions through an interpreter. Short questions. Direct ones. Where were the retreating forces headed? How many units remained in the city? How long had the radio been active? Lukas answers quietly. But carefully. Radio operators are trained to think about information differently than most soldiers. They understand what details matter. and which ones should remain unsaid. So he answers the questions that are obvious. The ones already visible on the battlefield. The city was abandoned during the night. The main units retreated west. His orders were to maintain communication until enemy forces arrived. The officer nods slowly. None of this is surprising. The battlefield already confirms most of it. War rarely hides its movements completely. Eventually the questioning ends. The officer waves his hand dismissively. Another soldier leads Lukas back outside. There are more urgent matters to attend to. The front line continues moving. The war continues. Days pass. Then weeks. The war moves further west across Europe. Cities fall. Armies collapse. Front lines dissolve. For soldiers on both sides, survival becomes the only clear objective. Lukas Adler disappears into the endless system of wartime prisoners. Transport trains. Temporary camps. Processing centers. The routine of captivity is quiet compared to the chaos of battle. But the waiting is longer. Years later, when the war finally ends, many soldiers return home carrying memories that never completely fade. Some remember battles. Others remember moments of fear. Or decisions made under pressure. But Lukas remembers something simpler. A small apartment room. A radio transmitter glowing in the dark. And the sound of boots climbing a wooden staircase. For most people, the war will always be remembered through large battles. Massive offensives. Famous generals. Historic victories. But history is also shaped by small moments. Quiet decisions. And ordinary soldiers performing difficult tasks. Sometimes far away from the main battlefield. Lukas never considered himself a hero. He did not fire a weapon that night. He did not command troops. He simply followed orders. And continued transmitting messages a little longer than expected. 10 minutes longer. Just enough time for the retreating column to clear the final road. Somewhere along that road, hundreds of soldiers continued marching through the snow. Unaware of the radio operator still working inside the ruined city behind them. Unaware that the last signal guiding their escape was coming from a single room with broken walls. And a flickering oil lamp. War often feels overwhelming. Too large. Too chaotic. Too complex for individual actions to matter. But sometimes, history shifts quietly. In small rooms. Through small decisions. Through voices carried across invisible radio waves. Sergeant Lukas Adler's final transmission lasted less than a minute. Just a few sentences spoken into a microphone. Yet those words traveled through the air across kilometers of frozen battlefield. Reaching commanders. Guiding movements. Buying time. Time that allowed an army to disappear into the winter roads beyond the city. Time measured not in hours, but in survival. The war eventually ended. The cities rebuilt. The ruins cleared away. But somewhere in an archive, old radio logs still exist. Faded pages filled with short transmissions. Coordinates. Enemy sightings. Routine reports. Among them is one final entry. A simple line written by a tired radio operator before the signal went silent. Enemy armored units approaching city center. Transmission ending. For the soldiers who escaped that night. Those words were the last warning they would ever need. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to help us remember and share stories from the front lines. Stories from the past help us understand humanity in difficult times. Share your thoughts in the comments, every memory matters.